Hiya, this is KS3 Humanities lesson. We've been looking at a British society in the past, and we've been focusing on Victorian society. So we are looking at how you could use information from that time to make observations about what society was like. Now, you have done a lot of work on this, and you will know a lot of these facts and a lot of these pieces of information. But what I want you to do today is to start thinking about what you can infer from this. So what led up to these events and what the impact of these events were. So the first thing I've got in front of you now is a number of things that happened in Queen Victoria's reign. And what I want you to do, first task, really, really easy. I want you to put them in chronological order. So the way you will do that is you can draw a timeline, and you can start with the earliest event leading on to the latest event. And I can give you a clue that 1901, Queen Victoria dies, the Victorian era ends, is the end of that timeline. So that is the end of the Victorian era. So I want you to put these events in chronological order. And if you want, if you're working on your exercise books, you can just put the dates so we can see that the dates go in date order, or you can write out the statements that go with them as well. So you put these in chronological order. We're going to think very, very briefly about some of the things that we know that changed in Victorian society. So, for example, we know at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign that children were working. We know, we've been through the impact that had on children's health, on society as a whole, on their education, on their future prospects, and what it meant for Victorian families. So there's lots of information here about changes that were made to children's lives. But we've also got some information on inventions that happened at this time. So we've got railway excursions and the advent of cars and the fact that they had to start reducing the speed limit. And we have wars that happened. We have some information on Dr. Bernardo, who we've studied in depth. He's one of the key characters we looked at in terms of influencing Victorian society. So what did he do and why did he do it? We've got postboxes, developing communication, and the idea of football leagues. So actual clubs playing each other. Second slide is more information. I want you to see now if you can slot these into your timeline. So more events, more things that happened, and think again about very briefly about what the impact was. So telephone invented, railways being completed. We have a pandemic where thousands die in London because of dirty water, something quite poignant at the moment. The invention of the light bulb, and again communication, so the first stamp. So again, add these to your timeline, so making sure that you have them in the correct date order, so starting with the earliest and finishing with the latest. Again, you can pause the video, look at the screen and write these down. So what I want you to do next is I want you to take each event, and these are slightly different events, but these are pivotal moments in Victorian society, and I want you to take these events and I want you to think what led up to them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to model an example for you, and then you're going to have a go at practicing this on your own. So the first event we're thinking of is 1842. Children under 10 could no longer work in mines. I want you to think, what was the situation before this? So what would have happened before 1842? So we're saying from 1842 onwards, children could no longer work in mines under 10. So we can assume that before 1842, children under 10 were working in mines. That's our first piece of information. So we can assume children under 10 were working in mines. We've inferred that. We've not been told that, but we've worked that out. We also have a lot of background knowledge about what that was like for children and what working conditions were like. So we could say children were working in mines. That work was dirty, dangerous, it was dark, it was cramped. They ended up with poor health because of the work that they were doing. Then we can think a bit further on. Where should they have been? Why is that so shocking to us that children under 10 are working in mines? Because at the moment, in this day and age, children under 10 should be in school. So we can then assume that these children were not getting an education. What is the impact of that on those children's prospects and on their lives? So we're taking the fact of the law being passed and we're thinking about what that tells us about what led up to this. So we know now there was lots of issues with children that young working in mines. The law was passed. What were the after effects? So obviously children under 10 are now protected. They are not having to be injured or having poor health through working in difficult, dangerous conditions in the mines. They may be expected to do other things. What might they end up doing as an alternative? Maybe they will be able to go to school. If they're no longer being sent to work, maybe they can go to school. Maybe they will therefore get a better education and have better prospects. But there are also going to be negative impacts. So we know that families were living completely on the breadline and were really, really struggling for food. And in many cases, were starving. So if the children were no longer working in the mines, they weren't earning money. And actually, one of the negative consequences of this, some families were then pushed further into poverty because they were relying on their children to earn money for them. Okay? So you can see that some of this is stuff that you can assume from your own general knowledge and from thinking about that situation. Some of it you can bring in some of the stuff that we've done in class that we've learned about. Another example we've looked at, Great Western Railway was finished 1841. So how were people travelling? And again, I'm going to guide you a little bit on this one, but I'm going to give you the questions. I want you to think about answering them yourselves. So how did people travel before the railways were finished? Was that travel fast or slow? How would you get goods around the country if you wanted to open a factory? How would you get the raw ingredients that you needed and the resources that you needed into that factory? How would you get your product out of that factory? Why were the railways so necessary? Think about communities. How would you get to meet people who lived outside of your local area without the railways? Would you be able to marry other families? Would you be able to move out of area easily? And then the after effects. Think about the positives that the railways created. So what is the impact of people being able to travel around the country freely? What would be the societal and the economic impacts? What would be the impact for industry? And are there any negative consequences you can think of? So I want you to pause and I want you to write down your before causes and your after effects. Okay, moving on now. I've modelled an example for you. I've scaffolded, I've given you some help on the next example. I want you to have a go at the next few events without my input. So I want you to do exactly the same format. 1876, the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. I want you to do before. What was communication like before that? How would you get messages? And after, what was the impact of the telephone being invented? I want you to do the same for electric streetlights. Think back to the lessons we did on Jack the Ripper. How would the input of street lighting have impacted on what he was doing? Would he have been able to get away with what he was doing with street lights? Two more examples for you to work through. The last public hanging, 1868. We've talked a lot about death penalty and what you believe about it. What would have happened before 1868 and what would have happened afterwards? 1870, children aged 5 to 10 provided with schools, so they had somewhere to go. Again, what was life like before that happened? What was life like after that? 1856, police force in every town. Again, think about the work we've done on Jack the Ripper. What was the situation before? What was the situation after? 1851, the first free public library. Again, think about what life was like before that, what life was like after that. And again, we've been looking at the life and works of Charles Dickens, who was a very famous writer in those times, and how his stories had such a hold on society. Everybody wanted to read them. Everybody wanted to have the next instalment, but who could access it? And if there's a library, how would that help? And then the final one, again, railway tracks being built all over Britain, opening up the country. How would that impact on society? Before, what led up to it, and after, and then post boxes being built. So what you should end up with is a load of Facts and inferences. So facts are things that you know, inferences are things that you've worked out about Victorian society from these inventions and laws being passed. What can you tell about Victorian society? And then what was the impact? So that's us starting to look at how Victorian society changed the lives of people in Great Britain. So you should have a number of events now that have shaped Victorian society. I want you to pick one. I want you to pick one that you think would be the most influential, and I want you to tell me why. Why was that the most significant? Why did that have the biggest impact on Victorian societies? Now, it'd be quite easy for you guys to imagine children because of your age. So think maybe about how a child's life would have been impacted. Which one of these events would have the biggest impact on a child's life, and why? Now, that's quite a lot of work that I'm asking you to do, quite a lot of written work, quite a lot of thinking. And I want to stress that the first example I did with you, I really want you to take the time and work through each one and think of as many causes and as many effects as possible. Okay, so it is a big piece of work, and I really look forward to seeing it.